Welcome to another episode of Kaleidoscope Corner. My name is Bijan. With me, my co-host Melanie Maldonado, and today with us we have Craig DiVincenzo. Craig, how you doing today?
Good, I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Today's topic of discussion, we're going to be discussing schedules of reinforcement and how it pertains to maybe your situation or what we do here as a company. So, Craig, give us a simple example of a simple schedule and what it is.
Sure. So basically, reinforcement, it works on a continuum. On one end of the continuum, you have continuous reinforcement, which means that every single response is reinforced. That's the most simplest schedule. It's something we probably use when we're first introducing learners to a new activity or a new topic. So if we were teaching somebody to request for things, every time they requested for it, every time they engaged in that behavior, we would provide reinforcement. On the other end of the spectrum is something called extinction. And what extinction means is that every time a response occurs, no reinforcement is provided. And then everything in between is some sort of intermittent schedule of reinforcement. The four basic ones, or the four simple ones, are they're based off of ratio or time intervals, and they're either fixed or they're varied, which basically means that some schedules of reinforcement are based off of the number of responses that a person engages in. So I have to do something a certain number of times before I get reinforced. If it's fixed, that number of things is always the same. It's always 5 times that I need to raise my hand before I get called on. If it is varied, it's an average. It's an about every 5 times. Sometimes it's 1, sometimes it's 2, sometimes it's 10, sometimes it's 20, but it's about 5 times. If we do it on an interval schedule, it's not the number of responses, but the amount of time that lapses in between. So something like checking your iPhone for new messages, okay, is usually on some type of an interval schedule. It doesn't matter how many times you check. It doesn't matter. What matters is the number of times that you check after a certain period of time has elapsed. That increases the likelihood that reinforcement is going to be provided. So those are the main 4 schedules that we would use. And those are some basic examples.
Awesome. Now tell us a little bit about complex schedules. Do you have any examples of those?
Yeah, so what happens is that if you take those 4 basic schedules and you start combining them together, you can get much more complex schedules of reinforcement. They're typically called either multiple schedules or mixed schedules or concurrent schedules and things like that. And an analyst might combine them together to make a more complicated schedule of reinforcement. Or lots of times in the natural environment, those schedules are the ones that are occurring. It's not always the simple thing. The interesting part about the simple schedules is that when we're teaching children or we're using it in programming, we can use those simple schedules to control rates of behavior. Each of those 4 simple schedules has a certain pattern of responding that occurs, and in that pattern, it controls the amount and the volume of a response that occurs. So for example, in a varied ratio schedule, that's something like playing a slot machine. Right? So if you go to a casino and you play the slot machines, you put quarter in, you pull the handle, and the reinforcer is delivered on a varied ratio. The number of times you pull matters, but it could be 1 time or it could be 1,000,000 times, right? But what pattern that produces, if you've ever been to a casino and watched people play the slots, is a pretty steady, high rate of responding. People pump money into those machines pretty frequently. So if I want something to occur at a high, consistent rate, I'll put it on a varied ratio schedule. An opposite schedule would be something like a varied interval schedule, which creates a pattern of low, steady responding. It is something that if I want a behavior to occur, but I don't want it to occur as many times as pumping money into a slot machine, I might put it on a varied interval schedule, which then can keep that behavior at a nice, steady rate. The other 2 patterns also have schedules, which, if you get a chance to, out there talk with your analyst or something like that to work on those schedules, could be helpful in terms of controlling behavior and keeping it under a certain pattern that you'd like.
Well, from myself, my co-host Melanie Maldonado, Craig DiVincenzo, our program director across all our facilities, we thank you and hope you join us again.
Thank you guys for tuning in on today's episode. If you have any more questions about reinforcement schedules, please reach out to your local behavior analyst.